know that we are live now. So we just chit chatting back here, ladies and gentlemen. Before the show gets started, let me turn on my LinkedIn. I want to bring up those pages as well. Um, for everyone who's here, we have Sarah CB Guthrie. Doesn't that sounds like an author's name? Every time I hear it, like authors usually have like the name and the initials and things there. So an author, artist, whichever one. And then we have Alison French, ladies and gentlemen. So we want to welcome you all for being here for this podcast, a live version of it. For those who are going to be joining us and coming in, I want to give you kind of a little housekeeping type of a thing. Please, we love engagement. If you have ideas or comments or anything, throw them in the chat. We want to make sure that our guests get an opportunity to answer them. Questions more than likely will not be answered until the end, though, but still put them in there, right? Someone may say something to spark some interest in you, and you're like, oh, I want to ask that question. Even though it won't be to the end, still put it inside there so that we can see it. And actually, I think you're able to type that in there because I just put it inside the chat box, but I'll double check that in a second. For those who are watching, live, would you do me a favor and would you place, I didn't check this, would you place your question in this format? A Q with a colon, then write your question. Why, you ask? Simply because of this. My system parses questions and comments. So that way I can see specifically all of the questions come up in one file and all of the comments come up on the other. Because you ever sometimes be doing something and you're looking at the comments, you're trying to find a question and then it's like, let
Mhm.
me find a question.
Yep.
So this is a great feature that I can go straight to a question or something like that. So 2 minutes till we actually go live. Let me pull up some things. So anything you want to maybe just kind of shout out to anyone who may be coming in right now before we get started? Either
I'm
one.
so excited for this conversation today and talking about joy and how to structure a life that works for you. I'm really appreciate the work you're doing in this space, Lion, and really glad and honored to be here. So thank you for having us today.
Yeah, thank you guys as well. I appreciate it. How about yourself, Allison?
Oh, Sarah said it really well. I'm just happy to be here today, and always look forward to an opportunity to talk joy, with
Yeah,
anybody. Really, I think it's such an important thing that we often forget to do.
yeah.
Yep.
It is, and it's one of those things I also talk about sometimes that life doesn't come with that handbook, that playbook, right? We
Right.
learn, and I truly love the fact though that how much more open that people feel comfortable to speak about things like this. Years ago, mm-mm, no, we're hiding
Hmm.
everything. We're not letting anyone know. And then also, ladies and gentlemen, we just put in the chat a link to a workshop that we will reference here fairly shortly. Um, please click on that, and then our guests will talk about the workshop and everything. But it's in the chat currently, right now. And actually, you know what? Let me pull up my LinkedIn as well. I want to look at it on LinkedIn. If I showed you my computer system over here, it's most people usually automatically go, oh, felt feeling overwhelmed. And then my coach had to remind me a few times. She's like, you keep using the word is easy. You keep using the word, it's easy for you.
Mm.
Because once you get so used to something, it's like you expect someone else to be like, why don't you get it? Like why it's easy. No, it's easy for me. I have to remind myself about that at times as well. Okay. So let's see. Okay. So we are good to go. People will start coming in when they do. I will get ready to pull up this thing. And that was weird that LinkedIn canceled that link. Like I can't, I'm trying to log on to it right now.
It
And I
was,
don't see it.
yeah,
Why
it
does it
was
keep
really
starting off?
strange.
It's
LinkedIn
okay now.
they've been acting wonky for the last couple of days. All right, so let's me go ahead and get ready. And again, ladies and gentlemen, please put your questions in there, your comments, preguntas, despuedas, whatever you like. So place those in there one more time. Don't. It did it again. That's okay. We're gonna rock and roll. All right. So let's me go ahead and get ready to get this started. And that, let me explain this real quick before we do that, because I love telling people. One of the reasons why I do it this way is because I don't want to interrupt the flow of the speaker. Right? If you're in your flow, maybe it's a question that you do want to answer. And if you ladies do see a question that you want to answer, because you should be able to see it as well coming up on your end, then you feel free to jump in and, answer or address that question or even a comment, whatever. I don't personally want to, cut your flow off if you're flowing and then be like, oh, hey, there's a question for you. And maybe you're not ready for that question. So that's one reason why I do it. So that way the podcast episode is not question heavy when someone's listening to the episode, right? I want them to get all that information. So, all right. So, ready to go? All
Ready
right.
to go.
Here we go. Let me make sure my marker is on. There we go. Marker is on. And away we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Redesign Your Life, the podcast that tells you that it is okay to live the life that you choose to live. Find a passion, find a joy. Do not just be susceptible to what society says that you have to do, right? It's your choice. I want to make sure you enjoy that as well. So today we're going to be talking about some of that, right? Finding joy, passion in your entrepreneurial journey, and we're going to be speaking with Sarah and Allison. And I'm excited because one reason why I do these sometimes with my guests, don't tell them, is because I want to learn. I truly do. I'm like, they're talking about something that I like. So let me find out a little bit more about that information. Okay. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to bring our guests on and give them a big round of applause for Sarah and Allison. Yay, yay. And that's Sarah
Yay!
with an H, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure y'all get it right. So, how are y'all
Thank you for
today?
noting.
Yes. So, how are y'all day doing today?
Doing
Doing
great.
great. Really excited to be here.
Yes. You know what? Before we jump into it, right, I wanted to take maybe a few moments to have both of you kind of introduce yourselves, tell our listeners, um, who you are at your core, what you're doing, why. And I do that because a lot of times we'll just jump into an interview or something, and I want to. It's like reading a book, right? You need to find out a little bit about who the character is to build that. Oh no, don't take them out of this, the series or something to build that up. So, Sarah, why don't we start with you? Just take maybe 30 seconds to a minute and let everyone know who you are and a little bit more about yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Guthrie. I am the artist who brings you joy, and I live in Seattle. I've been living here for about 12 years. I paint, this is my medium, but I also write, and I write every week about joy and having a joy practice. And that's been the center of my work, both on the canvas and in the typing of the words for the last 7 or more years now. And I'm really excited to be here today and to talk more about it, as well as my journey as an entrepreneur artist.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. Allison, please let us know a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Alison French. I'm in the other Washington, right outside of Washington, D.C. I am the owner of a company called Alto Solutions. And what I do is I work with organizations and their people who are going through some sort of change, helping them to manage and lead through the change, helping them to improve their leadership, improve their communications, build strong teams. And I found that in my work, over really the last 20 years in sort of the consulting realm, that it's really important to incorporate these elements of joy, of kindness, of play, all of these things that we don't usually think about when we think about being a manager and being a leader. And so that's what brings me here today.
Love it, love it, love it. And for some of the listeners, we also want to tell you that this is being broadcast on my YouTube channel, so you can come and watch a video as well. And the reason why I say that is because my background is a little bit different today, ladies and gentlemen. We have I don't know what's the correct terminology of it. A painting, a design. What would you say it
It's a
is?
painting.
A
It's a
painting. Okay.
photograph of one of my paintings. Yep.
Okay. So we're using the photograph of one of Sarah's paintings as the background. And I truly got to tell you, when we first were talking about how to set this up and everything, and then she told me about the painting, we put it up on the screen, and immediately, I think one of my words I said was like, it's soothing. It was
Mm.
like m- watching it and then watching everything is like, I felt kind of a, what's the word, calm down, a kind of just like a not anxiety went away a little bit. So you've got to see this. So if you're listening to this, make sure you come and watch it. She's going to talk a little bit more about, the story behind it a little bit later, but it's like a I can only use Can you describe it briefly real quick? Because it's not
Yeah,
mosaic.
so I
It's
can hear you starting to say the word mosaic, and there
yeah.
definitely are the way in which I paint has that feel of mosaic. I've heard some people describe it as pointillism, but it's like not little dots, it's bigger petal marks. And I
Mhm.
use I've custom trimmed my paintbrushes so that we'll have these like soft corners on it because that soothing feeling, that sense of rest, that's exactly the kind of feeling I want for people to have when they look at my work. Just like able to get out of their headspace and into the present. And part of that is just calming our central nervous system, right? So I'm
Yeah.
so excited that the painting resonated for you at that level, Lion. That's great.
Yes, yes. I almost picture myself if you ever watched the movie and then there's a character who's in one of those museums and they're looking at an art on a wall and they're just like they're trying to figure it out, right? They're like, well, I wonder what the artist was thinking when they did this. That's kind of how I was. So, but okay, so we will get into that later. But I want to start off by kind of finding out a little bit about both of your entrepreneurship journey, kind of how that started. Then we're going to come back into the collaboration. So we want to start with you, Allison, first, and maybe kind of start to let everyone else know about your journey. Where did that happen? And this is how I paint my picture, right? I'm trying to paint a movie in someone's mind.
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking about someone who is working at their office desk, right? And they are trying to maybe think about starting a small business, a side hustle. They're feeling burnt out. They're sitting there and they're thinking, what else can I do? Because I don't know what to do. I want you to speak to maybe someone in that kind of situation and about how your journey started or whatever, right? Can you share a little bit about how your
Yeah.
entrepreneur say that three times fast
No,
entrepreneurship
entrepreneurship.
journey started, and then we're going to come to you afterwards, Sarah.
Sounds good.
Well, it's really interesting because I never really had any designs on being an entrepreneur. It's not like when you're a kid and they ask you what you want to be when you grow up, you say, I want to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be an art teacher at one point, although unlike Sarah, I'm not very good at art. So I wanted to be an architect at one point. I wanted to be, I think, an actor at one point. There's so many different things that you say you want to be, and an entrepreneur doesn't always readily come to the tip of your tongue. But I think what I realized over the years, my career journey, starting with, graduating from college, has been a little bit of a windy road. It hasn't been a straight path. And what I think I've learned along the way, and we talk about this in our workshop, and I think we'll talk about this more today, is that there were a lot of downturns. And I, started out in computer consulting, which was definitely my forte. I was actually recruited into a management trainee program that did not actually exist. So that was pretty interesting, to be, 21 years old and in New York City and at a program that didn't actually have any legs whatsoever. And so being sort of thrust into environments where there was a lot of uncertainty helped prepare me, I think, down the road to be an entrepreneur, although I didn't know it at the time. So, where I think the bug really started to bite me was I was working for Deloitte, great company, doing consulting work. That was about 20 years ago. And I realized that I enjoyed the work that I was doing. There was a lot of other things that were going on in the company that as a manager I needed to do, and I had teams that I was managing. And where I really got my spark was from doing this work with clients, helping them manage through change, helping them build strong teams. And I ended up leaving Deloitte, went to another company and got downsized. And when I got downsized is the kick off the ledge that I needed to start my entrepreneurship journey for real, where I had been thinking about it for a while. I had been thinking about doing the kind of work that I really love doing, but also having some balance for myself and for my family. I had an infant at the time, an infant and a toddler actually, and it wasn't, didn't want to go back into Big Four consulting. So it was just a matter of, hey, I really love doing these things. I sort of recognized where that passion was and just started talking to people in my network, people I knew who had done it before to see how they had actually done it, making the connections, and then having the courage to jump off that ledge.
Wow, it's it's such a story that resonates, I think, with most people, right? Because most people, as you're speaking that, I'm kind of thinking like, yeah, that sounds probably like a X percentage of people sitting there saying the same things to themselves, and they want to take that leap, but they're afraid. They don't know where,
Mhm.
how, kind of what's about to happen. And I love when, for example, how you guys can set up a workshop or talks to, hey, let's take this step by step. We're here with you, and so I can see that helping other people. Because again, like I said earlier today, we don't have a playbook for life and so forth, right? And one of my sayings, and then we're going to jump to you, Sarah, is I love to tell people who say, "Oh, I want to start my own business. I want to become an entrepreneur or something." And I was like, "Okay, hey, well that's great, but just keep this in mind too. It is lonely at the top, but it's lonelier at the laptop." And I jokingly say that to tell people that you need to find like-minded people, people that's going to be around
Yeah.
you to push you. Because if you're just trying to do it by yourself, then those imposter syndrome thoughts are going to creep in, all that kind of stuff. So, Sarah, let's hear your journey and hear what's going on with you.
Yeah, so I've known since I was 6 that I wanted to be an artist, but I am also an immigrant. I don't sound it anymore, but my parents and I came from the United Kingdom when I was 2 years old. So they had very classic immigrant parent family expectations, doctor, lawyer, something like that. And so when I started talking about wanting to be an artist and I was drawing all the time and coloring all the time, there was not a lot of support. I'll just say that, which is a very common experience for immigrants, as particularly immigrant artists. And so I began trying to figure out like what else would I want to do. So I found an answer that was satisfactory that seemed achievable to me. I will be a lawyer, and so I started telling people that. And then I remember in my early 20s talking with someone, she was like, Sarah, you are too creative to be a lawyer, which no offense to lawyers, because there's a lot of creativity in the work of law. It is a practice, like art is a practice. But I realized that I needed to kind of keep trying to figure out what this is. And I really missed making art. I'd kind of stepped away from it as I was going through college and that kind of thing. And so I began to work in communications, and that was a lot of fun. It was creative. There was some art and design to it, which I really enjoyed. And I really love writing as well. Writing is a big part of my practice as an artist, but the desire to paint and the desire to grow never stopped. And so I kind of ran a parallel track for about 20 years of growing my career. I worked in university administration, doing marketing communications and human resources and employee communications and benefits. And then also at the same time, growing my artists. I needed to try and figure out what is my art? What does it look like? That takes time. And there was a way in which I knew younger, and I'm glad I kind of stuck by this, even though it was painful to acknowledge at the time, that I didn't know what I wanted to say as an artist. And I didn't know what would drive me to create work all the time. And I kind of needed to live some life. And so for the artist who is sitting at her desk in an office in her like day job and trying and feeling frustrated about that, I want you to know it's okay. That's part of your process, is you're giving time and protecting your work and your artist practice. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I it's one of those. Do you ever get like, okay, so I've got a fan sitting right next to me to kind of blow air on me and cool me down, and I'm still getting chills right from hearing it. You know, kind of give it a little picturesque thing, like because as you're speaking, I can hear the passion, and that was going to lead me into kind of what I was going to ask about next, the love and why we do what we do. But before I do that, I want to kind of touch on something you mentioned there, and I think it's very important. And please, if anything I say is out of the box, left field, please help me to kind of reel it in because I want to make sure the information gets put out in a way that people understand it. So my thought on it is, you have to fail in order to become good or better. Maybe not good, but better, right? There's
absolutely.
some people out there who may try something. They may try a business like Allison. They may try art like you, and they just do it a couple of times and no one purchased this or no one signed up for this, or and then they give up, right? And that's kind of why we got to talk about that joy and reigniting the flame and all of that stuff. So I love that. I'm going to ask you to now, and we're going to stay on this page here, but give me maybe something that you love about what you do and why you do it, and then also at the end maybe a tip or two that helps you bring joy back, or that maybe with someone else. And let's start with Allison and maybe share with us what you love and a tip that you want to give out to someone.
Sure. Well, first thing I want to say is that idea of failing to get better. I just want to put that out there because I do a lot of leadership coaching, a lot of leadership development work, and people are often afraid that they're going to fail. And that is a symptom of or that's evident of a fixed mindset. And to be able to really grow in your work, in your entrepreneurship, whatever it is, you want to have that growth mindset. So I always look at failure as FAIL, first attempt in learning. F first, A attempt,
Mm.
Ooh.
IL learning. It's your
Let me
first
grab my
attempt
pen.
in learning. Grab your pen, write that down. And I will say that, as I mentioned before in my journey, there have definitely been periods of time where I felt like a failure or I felt like an imposter and I wasn't sure why I was doing what I was doing. And I think, through the years, it all helped me to understand what I really loved. Doing some of the things that I didn't love so much helped me to realize what I did love. And, just like Sarah mentioned, there was always an expectation for me to be a fill in the blank, be a doctor, be a lawyer, something of that ilk. And it's never anything that I wanted to do. And for a while, I really questioned myself because of that. What's wrong with me that I don't want to be a lawyer, like my parents want me to be. Um, and it took a while. I'm going to be honest. It took a little while to
Yeah.
kind of understand the moments that were sort of down moments and how they were able to bring me up by looking at the joy that comes from those, that the unexpected parts of joy that come from those. And looking back on my journey, I was always doing a lot of the things that I ultimately wanted to do. I just wasn't doing them together. And so I was working with people, I was making connections, I was writing, I was doing a lot of those things piecemeal. But now I get to work with leaders, I get to work with organizations. And what really brings me joy is when I see that aha light go on, when I see them make a connection either with someone else or to an idea that really helps them with whatever challenge that they're facing. And I like to think that, I'm helping them in their journey there. I'm not giving them the answers, but I'm there to facilitate. I'm there to help them, get to that point where they're making those connections themselves. And that really brings me a lot of joy to be able to be a partner in that journey with them.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing because a lot of times people can sometimes feel that maybe I don't want coaching because I don't want to feel like I'm being talked at, right? Or, you know, well, it worked for me, so it should work for you. hey, let's go on this journey together. And so I really like that. So thanks for
If you
sharing
have
that.
somebody who's trying to coach you and telling you what you should do, then they are not a coach. That is not a coach at all.
Exactly. Yes. Sarah, how about yourself? Let's talk about your love for what you do. And I love when you were referencing about what the atypical job you should have done because it was not. So real quick, and now jump into what asking
Mhm.
you a question. For me, it was very different because in my number one in my culture, that's not a pressed upon thing in those fields, right? It's usually sports, music, or something more like
Mm.
that. But as coming up as a kid, I didn't directly know until later in life when I got tested. My IQ was 162, and as a kid, I didn't know my brain was what's going on. So I could never focus on one thing, but I would finish things fast. And I remember being in college one time, my professor yelled at me because I was sleeping. Wake up! And then I was like, yeah, I got it. He's like, what did I say? And I just started reciting back almost
Mhm.
verbatim what he said and finished the thing because I was an auditory learner. But anyways, so I didn't take the atypical thing of being an attorney. I actually wanted to be a linguist, believe it or not, as a kid. Who knew?
That's
I like
awesome.
I'm like a 12-year-old kid speaking different languages, and people are like, "How did do that?" I'm like, I don't know. Some people can
That's
play a
cool.
keyboard if they hear it. I could listen to languages and just start. So I was like, I don't know, but anyways, okay. So tell us about your love, and then also maybe throw out a tip for someone as well.
Yeah, I think there's so much I love about what I do. One of the biggest things I love is the connections I get to create with people. A lot of my work, it's about joy, so it's a lovely thing to talk about. I love now that I get to ask people, and P.S. anyone can do this. That's probably my tip, is asking people, so what brought you joy today? What brought you joy this week? Like, it's really fun. We're such a culture of productivity and that kind of thing. So we're usually like, what did you do? What do you do professionally? And that's fine, but it's really fun to talk about joy. And there's also for me something that's so soothing about being in front of the canvas. I kind of zone out or zone in, I think is probably a better way to put it, and just get lost in the paint and lost in the paintbrushes. And even on walks, that's one of my favorite ways to kind of refresh is to take the DOG for WALK because he's sitting nearby and he'll start like knocking on the door. Um, and just look at the color, just collect the colors in my mind and then bring those back to the canvas. Those are some of the things I absolutely love about this work.
Yeah, I remember when you kind of said it just a second ago about zoning in and so forth. My wife and I went to one of the like sip and paint type of things,
Oh,
Mhm.
that's cool.
and I'm
Yeah.
sitting there and I'm painting, and I recall the person who was hosting it. They came over by and they were like, "Oh, you did this wrong," and or not directly wrong, but you should do it this way. And I was like, "No, I did it exactly the way I would wanted to do it."
Mhm.
Right? Like it's my way of seeing it.
Thank
Like
you.
I
Yeah.
see the world so different in my ADHD brain, and sometimes, but it took me a long journey to be able to get there, and I'm still working on that. To be able to express to people, like, no, I'm okay seeing it the way I see it, right? I don't
Hmm.
see it the way you see it, but I'm okay with that now. It's okay to not always be okay. But, anyways, collaboration, one of my favorite things. And I want to know how the two of you hooked up and how did this wonder twin powers activate, formulated so you can start working. Who would like to take that and start off telling me how did the collaboration start?
So on my journey, I worked at a university in Washington, D.C., because I like living in places called Washington. And I worked there for about almost 20 years. And in that time, I met Allison. That's when we started meeting. And or that's when we met, I should say, not started meeting. Um, and, we grew a friendship over the years and, stayed in touch even when I moved to Seattle. And I remember because I had this background in human resources and I did training, had training in training design, performance management, all these other kind of things, as well as communications. As I was working in Joy, I kept thinking, like, I really would love to figure out a way to help bring this idea of joy into organizations and help people
Mhm.
feel more of a difference. Like the impact I can have on my collectors is really great. The impact I can have with the people that subscribe to my email list is really great. But I want to have an even bigger impact. And then one day I got a phone call. So I'll toss it over to you, Allison, for that.
Yeah, it's so funny because I'm very supportive of Sarah and her work. You can actually see which way am I going here? This is one of
Yeah,
the
there you go.
paintings behind me. I know I have to go the opposite way that I think I'm going to go. And getting her newsletter and everything. And so it's one of the newsletters that I do read every week, that I look forward to every week. And trust me, there are a lot of others that I get that go into a folder and then get batch deleted at some point in time. And Sarah's is definitely not one of those.
Oh,
And I think, having done work around leading with kindness, it sort of sparked something in me when I was reading, and I don't know exactly which newsletter it was that I got, but there was one that I was reading, and it just occurred to me that yeah, there's something here for leaders and organizations, just like leading with kindness, being able to find joy, explore concepts of joy. It could be a team building kind of an activity. It could be something that leaders do to get new perspective. And so I reached out to Sarah with what I thought maybe was a crazy idea. And it turns out she had already been thinking about it. And so it was sort of a perfect match.
Yeah,
indeed.
it's crazy when we get to those points of like mind melding, right? And you're like, oh, I was thinking about that. It's funny because my wife and I go through this all the time. We will almost synchronizationally, if that's a word, I just created it. Make sure
No.
I get the rights for it. Uh, but we will say things all the time at the same time, and then we look at each other and we're like, stop it, right? Because you both were thinking about the same thing, and one person reached out, and that kind of like started that. And as you're speaking, I'm hearing something, not the accent, no, not the accent, but I'm hearing you use words, and I'm going to ask you about it because I think you're saying it subconsciously, but you say it so much, but it's a part of your vocabulary use. So, for one, Allison, you say something of it's we're doing it or we're working in kindness, and then Sarah, I'm hearing you say often something like I work in joy or I like at the end of it. So, can you all explain? Is that on purpose, or have you just said it so much that it's part of the tagline? What's going on? Let's start with Sarah. Would you mind explaining a little bit of what that is? How do you define the joy, or I'm working in joy?
Yeah, so the whole concept of joy began in early 2017. I was really struggling for what's my purpose in art when there's like a lot of trouble in the world. And I had talked with an art colleague, and they said, the thing is, even we have all this work we need to do, but we also need to come home and feel better. Like home needs to be a respite, and art can be an important part of that. I was like, oh, that's really true. And I was walking my dog that night, and bless his heart, he was a very reactive dog, so we had to walk a long way to get away from people and other dogs. And we saw this gorgeous sunset, and I just felt so much joy seeing it. And suddenly I was like, I want to know what brings other people, what colors bring other people joy. There was something about that combination of the sunset colors. And so I ran home, posted on social media, and the next day had dozens of responses, which was a lot for where my social media platform was at the time. And I realized I had hit on something that people really needed to feel joy in their lives. And so that was the starting moment, that moment in the field with my dog. And over time, I've realized that as I've been having this practice of both writing and painting, that's really what my work is about. My work is about joy, and how can I spread more of it in the world? How can I live more joyfully myself, and how can I share that with other people? And so when I talk about working in joy, that's a lot of what I mean by that.
Thank you for sharing that, Allison. What is your kindness referring to when I hear you speak about that?
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if you remember back in back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, Mr. Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Do you remember Mr. Rogers?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
wonderful neighborhood. Yes.
There you go. Everybody remembers the song. And I, number of years ago, I happened to be watching some reruns with my kids when they were quite a bit younger. And it occurred to me that Mr. Rogers is all about leading with kindness. He was
Mm,
kind to everybody. He accepted everybody. He brought everybody kind of into the fold, regardless of, the color of their skin, whether they had a disability. It just didn't matter. He was just kind to everybody in that neighborhood. But he was also a leader and he was also a teacher. And when COVID hit, it had occurred to me that we are all going into this environment where we're living virtually and we're not having that human connection anymore. But Mr. Rogers, he had that human connection through a screen. So why can't we? And so I
mm,
actually worked with another colleague of mine, and we put together some workshops based on the work that Mr. Rogers did and how do you apply it as a leader. Um, you know, and it's all based in connection and kindness, and how do you really see people for who they really are, and you have that empathy and you have that vulnerability for yourself, and you're able to really have an individual focus on the people that you're working with, and not everybody is the same, and you have to recognize that and to bring with it a little bit of playfulness as well. So I've been working in that for quite a number of years, and joy just seemed to be kind of a natural next step, where all of that kindness that sort of hopefully now overflowing is bringing people joy. And the kind of joy that we talk about is not, when you think of joy, you think of jumping for joy. And it's
Right.
not that, it's something a little bit deeper, because you can find joy in moments of difficulty as well. And Sarah, I know you have you
mm.
explain it really well. But I think for me, it's really more of that. It's that feeling, like that feeling. It's almost an indescribable feeling that you get, like when you were in front of the beautiful sunset, or you know, a couple of weeks ago there was a big rainstorm, and I walked outside and there was a double rainbow, and I had that same kind of feeling that, it's hard to describe. I wasn't jumping up and down, but I definitely felt that joy in my heart.
Nice. I think it is such a resonating feeling when we can get to the calmness, right? Where we're not, like panting, everything's around us, but that takes a journey, that takes effort. And also, it's really nice to be in a group of people that can kind of help guide you through that. And in a second, we're going to ask about and talk a little bit more about the workshop that you're doing,
Mhm.
because as I'm reading and researching a little bit of what's going on in your worlds, I kind of like saw that and I was like, well, maybe they're assisting people or giving strategies and tips, because sometimes people need that. And there was a terminology. It was for Sarah, junctures, something in reference to
Joy
juncture.
Joy
I was
junctures. Yeah.
junctures.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I was reading that and my brain was like, okay, what is this? I need to find out what this is. Tell me, tell the listeners, tell the viewers, what in the world is a joy juncture? And both of you could jump in, but we'll start with Sarah here first.
Yeah, so for me, the idea, what joy is something I think of it as a spark that we all have within us. We carry it with us and we can activate it because it's within us. We can activate it anytime. It's not dependent on our circumstances to feel it like happiness is. And so we can be in some of our darkest times and still feel joy. Like you think about going to a funeral, not to get really dark, but going to a funeral and the kind of levity and the lightness that comes when people tell a loving anecdote about the person who's passed, and how meaningful that is in the room, and the sense of connection that grows in the room. That's joy. That moment, that's joy. And we have the capacity to create that in our daily lives, by doing things that spark it for us. And so it can be a whole host of different things. But it's this idea that you can feel joy even as you're feeling sadness, as you're feeling grief, as you're feeling anger, as you're feeling despair. It's a it, it's a paradox when you first start working with it, but as you grow a joy practice, you get to feel more comfortable with it. And so a joy juncture, what we're talking about there is this place where you're in a really dark and difficult time, and you can see, either looking back or in the moment itself, you can see the joy that's there, because joy is always present.
I think it is so important, especially now in this time frame, that we try to find joy in whatever we can, right?
Absolutely.
Walking down the street, and I remember when I first kind of started my journey of trying to reframe my mindset and learning to be positive on things. And my coach was like, if you're walking down the street and maybe a bird's flying over and a bird poops on you, you got those choices, right? You can get frustrated, mad, but then you want to turn it around and you can go, look at this. Out of everyone around me, it chose me. Like, you guys, sorry. Yeah, you gotta find a
It's
way
good
because you
luck.
can stress yourself
It's
out.
good
Right.
luck, right?
See, I would be like, oh, now I get to go to the hair salon immediately, cancel all the afternoon appointments and get my
Yes.
hairs done
Mhm.
Gotta find a
and
way
take care of
because
myself.
that we
Thank
can
you, Bert.
stress ourselves or whatever, but we have to
Yeah.
find a way. Yeah, Allison, would you like to kind of reflect on that and touch on that? I know you mentioned joy, but is there a junction? How would you explain to maybe someone in your world that you're trying to explain this to as well?
Yeah, and the workshop that you mentioned, we two of the things that we do is we bring people through a journey and help them find those joy junctures out of times that might be a little bit, they don't think of as joyful necessarily. And so it's kind of looking in that rearview mirror and saying, hey, something good did come out of this. Like, for instance, in my career, like I mentioned before, I got hired out of college to work in a management training program that didn't exist. And I showed up there as a, young person ready for my first job. And it was kind of devastating. But when I look back on it, I see that that led me to a different opportunity. And maybe if I had been in this program, I would have stayed at this company, which was really not a good fit for me regardless, but it gave me an opportunity to do something else. And I ended up going to work for, at the time, a company that reviewed restaurants for the owners. And I was, this young, just out of college person going to some of the finest restaurants in New York City. And that was a joy juncture for me because I absolutely loved doing that, but I wouldn't have an opportunity to do that if that management training program had actually existed. So that was a moment I was able to look back in time and say, okay, I felt kind of disgruntled at this point, but there are joyful things that came out of it. And so that's one of the things that we will walk through in the workshop.
I love that because again, it's those steps that people can implement. I don't say steps, but just advice, ideas, whatever it is that people can implement. And anyone who is listening, please do me a favor and pay attention to what's being said here because every little moment that you can find joy is something where you can always look back on and just enjoy that moment, right? And I always talk to my son, I tell him our little saying that we always say is memories over money, right? I want you to make
Mm.
memories because I want you to be 35, 45, whatever. I want you to take your kids to this lake and then
Hmm.
that memory starts to come back. This is where dad and mom would sit over there and make sandwiches or something. I want you to tell your kids that story, and we're working to build generational choices that his kids would then pass, and do things like that, right? So
Sure.
we all
Yeah.
have those choices to make joy, and we just put inside the chat, ladies and gentlemen. So make sure you see this in the show notes as well. There's a free gift to the 10 practices, I think it's called, of the joy that you've bestowed upon our listeners and viewers. So make sure you go and check those out because if you can find one, two, three things on there to say, oh, I could have been doing that, or I can do that right now to
Mhm.
start your joy junction. So I appreciate y'all for giving our listeners and viewers the opportunity to get that gift. Now let's get into the workshop.
Woo.
Tell us about it. What can people expect? What is it kind of embracing? Let's start with I'm gonna do. Let me close my eyes. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Take a guess, but
Doesn't matter. We can both talk.
Let's go with Allison.
whoever wants
I
to
talk
start,
last. Why
please
don't you
do.
go, Sarah?
Okay.
You want
Um,
me to? Either way. Either way is fine.
so the So I'll start, Allison, and then you can pick up. So the joy, sorry, I'm having a moment. Allison, go ahead.
Sure, sure. So
When I get excited, I get a lot of
the
different
workshop
ideas
is
at
called
once.
the workshop's called Own Your Journey, Reclaim Your Joy. And so we start, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, looking with a look back. And we have people kind of assess where kind of their paths have taken them and pick a period of time that they want to explore further. And we help them to look at that period of time, figure out what some of the maybe the not so great moments were, and then help them realize where the joy junctures were. So that's part one of the workshop. And then in part two of the workshop, we explore these joy practices that you'll see on the handout that you just posted into the chat, and that is going to be on the in the show notes. We really go a little bit deeper into each of those joy practices, and we help people understand what are some things they can be doing, like you said, Lion, right now to help them build their own joy practice. And then we lead them through an activity to help them build an additional joy practice for themselves.
One of the things we've talked about a lot today is we've talked about how we live life through expectations. And part of the journey, it sounds like all three of us have gone, is to go against those expectations. And all three of us, I think what we share in common is we followed a path that's given us more joy. And that's really what we want to help people to see, is how can you find a path? How can you create a life that brings you more joy? How can you start making choices from joy, from kindness, rather than from expectations, social
Mm-hmm.
constructs, and the like? And I really think this workshop does that, and it gives people some tools that they can walk away with right away after it's a 2 hour workshop. It's online. They'll be able to walk away with some concrete things that they can do right away to help bring more joy to their life and to help reframe some parts of their life or career that may have been really disempowering or hard or difficult, and find a new way to think about them that is empowering, that recenters them in their power and who they are as a person.
Yeah, it's so nice because those are the moments where, especially if you can get, I don't think that most people do it because of this, right? But if you can get a word back from someone that you've assisted in some way, right? Someone reaches back out to you and say, you know what, I
Mm-hmm.
went through that workshop, I spoke with you, I did whatever, and this, and that happened. You're like, yes, even if it's just that one person, right? Some people ask me, why do you do a podcast? You don't know people. Like, if it helps one person,
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
just tell them that they can redesign. They don't have to stay in the perpetual state of sadness or something, or
Exactly.
anything like that. One of my sayings, and at the end, when people see my outro video, it says, "Live while you are alive." Right?
Mm.
Life is meant to be
Oh,
lived, not just wake up, go to, do the same thing every day. We want to enjoy those moments. And I'm going to preface this by saying this because I said this one time before, and I got a few letters written to me. Um, so you want to take your time, masticate 20 times with your food before you swallow it. Right. So I had to slow that down because I said that one time. People were like, you said what? No, no, no. Masticate.
Mastic.
You chew.
Right.
Chew,
The
chew.
safety word for sure.
Right. Yeah. And I wasn't thinking about it when I said it. I just said it. And
Right.
then people wrote me, and my son was listening. And I was like,
Oh.
what are you talking about? And then I was like, and it, like, oh, no, ma'am. No, ma'am. So I was like,
Oh
okay, let me.
no. Oh no.
So, and the workshop, I think it was July the 11th. Is that
July
right?
July
11th. Yes.
11th.
Yeah. Joy in July 11th. They both start with J and end with Y, so it's easy to remember. July
There
11th.
we go.
7-Eleven, another easy way to remember it. And
Oh,
it'll be from noon to 2 Eastern or 9 to 11 Pacific.
yeah. Okay, perfect. And ladies and gentlemen, while you're listening to this, we're going to get ready to wrap things up. But I want to make sure that you understand that take a moment, hop on, go, and if you're any place in your life, in your journey, whatever, and you're like, I can use a boost, I can use a little extra joy, I can use whatever. Take some time, go speak, attend, get some of that virtual energy coming into you because we can connect. Because when you were speaking about Mr. Rogers, I
Mhm.
often hear people say, well, it's virtual and we can't connect. And I was like, Mr. Rogers, right? We connected with him.
Hmm.
We felt like he was a part of our world, probably, right? Like I
Felt
gotta
like
go
it was
see
he was
him.
talking to you. I mean, I always felt like he was
Yeah.
talking directly to me, and I know he was talking to millions of viewers all over the country, but he was
Mhm.
talking to me. He was talking to
Yeah.
5-year-old Allison.
Yeah. And was there ever this probably happened? Was there ever a time maybe where he was speaking and he said the name Allison and you thought, that's me? But he probably was
Oh yeah,
talking to us.
there was a couple of children's TV shows that actually called out names at the end, and you were always like, "Are they going to say my name? Are they going to say my?" And
Oh,
it was so nice and personal. And I really feel
Yeah.
like you can be personal, even if it's on Zoom, which is what
Yeah.
our workshop will be over Zoom. But it's not a webinar. It's not a place where you can
Gotcha.
come in and just, see the talking heads of me and Sarah. That is not what this workshop is. This is a Zoom. This is an actual Zoom meeting, and we're going to have opportunities to interact. We're going to have opportunities for people to interact with each other. So, if you're expecting to sit through 2 hours of two talking heads, then that's not what you're going to get. You're going to get a very interactive situation. So
Thank you for explaining that because I cannot tell you how often I do that because I go and audit a lot of seminars and stuff like that, and then it led me to one of my sayings that I kind of say in my network meetings now. I say, "Have you ever been to a seminar, webinar, or something, and you thought to yourself, you know what, this could have just been an email, right?"
hmm
So
right, right,
it's like I hate those. I want to talk. I want to interact. You could have just recorded a video and sent it to me if it was going to be
right,
just you
right.
talking, right? So, all right. So
right.
let's get ready to wrap up, and I want to give the last final words to you to maybe shout out to the world, to the people who are listening, who may hear this in 3 years or something. I want to give you opportunity to say whatever message you like to say. Sarah, let's start with you, and maybe share anything, an example, anything you want to the viewers and the listeners.
What I want to share with you, the person who's listening to this at some time in the future, is trust that if you've heard something today that sparks something in you, that that seed, that idea is there for a reason, and follow it. You don't know where that journey is going to take you. It may not be a direct path, but follow, trust in yourself, trust in that idea, and go forward and follow the joy.
I love that. Follow the joy. And don't worry if you quote unquote fail. We talked about it
Mm-mm.
before. Failure is a first attempt in learning. It's not something bad. It may just redirect you on the path that you're supposed to be on. I know that there have been plenty of times in my career where it felt like a failure, but in looking back in hindsight, it wasn't at all. It was something that was meant to happen to bring me to where I am now. So don't let those little road bumps get in the way. Find the joy in those moments, find those joy junctures, and just carry on.
Yeah, I remember one time, and I need to get a little notebook and write down all my little sayings so I can publish it or something. Because I have another saying, no, but I remember one time I was in a competition and I didn't win, lost, whatever terminology we want to use, and I was sitting at a table with some fellow competitors, and I was quiet, and I'm not usually quiet, and they asked me, "What's wrong?" And I remember the first words that came out of my mouth and I said, "You know what? Losing is the best thing that can happen to a winner." And it thought about it because if you're a true champion, if you're someone who's going to get back up, that that loss is going to fuel you, burn you, get you back to the drawing board,
Mhm.
rewrite whatever you're doing, you're not going to just say, oh, well, you're going to continue to say, well, let me just rework it. Let me pivot. Let me try something else. So thank you both for coming today. I'm going to fly this plane in and bring it to a halt. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to take a moment, just a moment, to thank you all for coming to another episode of Redesign Your Life. The podcast, again, that is dedicated simply to letting you know that there are options out there that gives you a chance to continue growing, and there are paths that you can pivot and try something different. So if you have any questions, any ideas, please get in touch with our hosts and our guests. We sincerely appreciate you for coming along. Thank you very much. And remember to keep living while you are alive.
Here I come, you can't hide. Gonna find you and take it slow. Here I come.
Ooh. All right. I think her cam must have went off. Oh, she's coming back in now.